Hello, George here to make some marbles. Today I'm going to be making a marble out of glass rods over a torch. It's called torch working or lamp working, and I'll be making a marble with using enamel powders and glass rods. Here's enamel powder. This is very highly, densely colored powdered glass. And then some of the sparkly stuff I'll be adding is aventurine, which is essentially copper dust encased in clear glass. The glass is of the similar chemistry that I use with my glass rods. So I just have to adjust some of my tanks. It'll be a second. And then we can get started. Alright, I use a propane oxygen torch. The propane is at about 2 psi and the oxygen is about 8 psi. The oxygen comes in a big tank. It's a 250 cubic foot tank. Oxygen is pressurized at usually about 2500 psi from the tank when you first get it. So it needs a two-stage regulator to get the pressure usable for me at my torch. So there's a high side gauge which you turn on. High side gauge gets pressurized. Then you have an adjustment which you can adjust the pressure of the gas that's coming out of the low side of the gauge. And that is where I adjust my 8 psi for the torch. And then this adjusts volume on the torch. It goes from 0 to, I'm not sure how many liters per second that the flow is allowed out of this torch. This is a mid-sized torch, so I'm guessing a medium amount. For the propane, you can actually use like about 1 psi. I usually shoot for 2. If you go higher pressure than that, then you're getting too much volume of propane, and it can make the glass that I'm using seem dirty. There'll be formation of layers of what we generally just generically call scum. It's something that inhibits the shininess of the surface. Anyway, back to our marble. What we're going to make is an enamel marble. It's going to have a clear core. It's going to have a layer of enamel powder, which is powdered glass with a lot of opaquing and colorizing agent in it to color that core. Then over the core, I'm going to shape it so I can make stripes of decoration. You could use frit, you can use other enamel colors, you can use swiping stripes of opaque colors or transparent colors. And we're going to do a little bit of each, and then we're going to use sections of clear rod, which I'm going to cut now, which will arrange out around the cylinder to then form back as a clear casement for the marble. So I'm going to use a tile nipper and make myself about a dozen pieces that are going to be cut the length of the cylinder of the central core that I'm going to make. And we'll see what those look like. They look about like that big. A little over 1.1 inches probably. And I have a sort of a feeling of the length that I want to use with the size of the ultimate size of the marble that I'm going to do. The size will be dictated by the central cylinder that I make and how I change the length and diameter of that cylinder as I work it to then arrange a bunch of these little rod sections around that center. And there were some pictures that were up on the board during the pre-show that probably weren't very clear. But you could probably scroll back and they would make a lot more sense now. Or not. So, I want to put some colored stripes in the surrounding glass of the enamel powdered colored core. So I'm going to cut a few pieces of transparent color to mix in with those clear pieces that I will add on as the final layer of the glass marble that I'm going to make. Very often when I'm making glass, I make mistakes or have little pieces left over, or there's a kiln missetting that causes that batch that I'm working on to be no good that day for various quality control reasons. So what I do is I melt all those pieces down into a crucible, an electric crucible furnace, and I pull them out into rods. These rods generally have little flecks of gold and silver and dichroic, and come out as a kind of a light blue clear. I use this a lot for cores, for handles for holding on to the marble since I can't actually touch them, and that's what I'm going to use for the core of this marble. I'm going to get a gather of this light blue glass that has the same coefficient of expansion and contraction as the rest of my glass colors. And this, the center of the marble is going to be covered with enamel powder, which is going to opaque it and give it the color of the enamel powder that I'm going to use. I'm going to use white to cover the whole cylinder, and then I'm going to change the cylinder into more of a squarish shape to give 4 sides or panels that I will then decorate. One panel I'm going to decorate with the aventurine frit that I showed you, which is very sparkly and makes the marble really reflect light nicely and pop. One of the other panels will be a different color enamel powder, and then I will round those 2 decorated panels out so there'll be stripes on the cylinder. Then I'll cover that whole thing with mostly clear rod sections that I was just cutting out with those tile nippers, and a few colored pieces that will fit right in those panels that were undecorated on the white backdrop. There'll be the transparent color overlay. And if everything works out, it'll look really cool. So this is the gather that I'm starting to make, and I'm just twisting these rods together. There's no big rhyme or reason. There's a method that I like to use that I think does a good job without trapping air and goes relatively quickly. You see I melted off a piece of rod that was getting short, and I'm switching to another longer rod. I'm going to feed more of those rods into the gather. So the gathering method that I'm using is I'm twisting both rods, and as the lump in between the 2 rods gets bigger, I'm going to twist it and let that fold over a piece of the rod while I'm twisting it. And then it continues to melt into a gather, and it's become a little bit bigger, and I haven't trapped any air, but I've added the volume of those sections of rod to that central lump. And I'm going to do it a few more times. The bigger it gets, the faster it accrues more glass, because it has more heat in that central lump to melt the incoming rod portions. So now I've folded those rods in a few more times, and got to the size that I think will be appropriate to the size of the marble that I want to make. I'll be able to show some of the techniques that I want to demonstrate. So now it's a little messy shaped. Let's show it in the magnifying glass. Make sure that magnifying glass still works. So the shape is messy, so I'm going to heat it. I'm going to press it a little bit. I have a marver plate, or graphite flat surface that's next to my torch here that I can use to push down and make flat spots. But I also have this graphite paddle, so as I roll it on the marver plate, I can roll this on the top of it and be shaping it on the above and below. And I'll turn this semi-spherical blob into a cylinder, probably in a few short attempts. I'll roll it, push it, and I'll bring it back, and it should look a little more cylindrical. I might have to do that several times. A little cylindrical, and heat it again. Once I have it cylindrical, I'll probably melt off the rod that's my current handle for this gather that I'll be working on. And I'll switch it to a stainless steel rod, which makes a more long-term handle that I can put pressure on and won't do this flop. And that handle will allow me to do the work without having to deal with gravity quite so much. So I've taken the gather, I'm rolling it on the marver plate, I'm rolling it from above with this, and I've made it into a cylinder. And as I roll it between, if the marver plate was there, this would be the paddle above it, and sometimes when I'm rolling it, I'm also pushing it like this to make that end flat. And now that's where I'm going to attach my metal stainless steel handle. I can heat this up till it's about yellow hot, and the glass I'm keeping at about 1800 degrees, hot but not moving. And then I'm going to just, I can't do it that close to my face and see what I'm doing, a little farther away. And the glass was a little bit too cold, so it didn't want to dig in. And that time it did. So let's get that a little bit better centered. That. Now I'm going to melt off the glass portion. Now I'm going to make it a little more cylindrical and balanced to this new handle. So I'm heating up the whole thing. You can see that that's kind of a opaque, streaky, very tiny bubbles and sparkly things in it blue. That's just my leftovers that I'm giving a second life in the center of this marble. They'll take up space, but we won't ever see them again. Not this glass. We'll put very pretty colors around it. Alright, so there's my first roll to get a little more cylindrical. It's flopping around a little bit. There, it's firming up. I'm going to do that one more time. I'd like the ends to be flat and the cylinder to be coming to a fairly sharp point where it meets that cross-section disc of the front and the back. It's going to mark the beginning and end of the enamel powder that I'm going to cover the cylinder with. It doesn't have to be like razor sharp, laser sharp, just somewhat defined. And there we have the cylinder. You can see the end is flat there, the end is flat on this side. Now I'm going to heat the surface, the outer surface of the cylinder, and then I'm going to put it through this white enamel powder. There's some little other stuff in there, but that won't be a problem. I'll pick that up first. That'll be on the inside, and then the next pickup will be the clean underneath white enamel powder, and that will be on the outside layer. So it should look like a very nice white sand background. Just need the little tin lid that I'm using to hold that small amount of enamel powder is tiny, so I need to have it adjusted correctly when I go in to pick up my enamel powder. And what I'm doing is I'm just rolling it through like that, trying to pick it up. I'm doing a better job off camera than I was just then. Because I actually picked up a bunch of the enamel powder. You can see it's not a smooth look, which is what I want. I want that soft look where you can't really tell where one surface ends and one begins. It gives a living characteristic to the glass that I really like. I've heated the surface and that enamel powder in to the surface of the glass. And I picked up another layer, the enamel powder. I'm going to do it one more time. Because although it looks like you've got a lot of enamel powder on there, when you melt it and you start stretching the ends, that enamel powder is in a very thin layer, so it gets rarefied and you can see through it. Which is kind of nice on the ends. When you see it pulling to a point, you're getting an idea of, yes, there is something going on that surface. It's not homogeneous. It's not mechanically formed. It looks like, you know, the middle of a flower or the base of a leaf where the color and texture is changing. But for the middle part, I'm more interested in the surface irregularities than the light not penetrating through. So let's melt that in. And now we're going to move to the next step. I drew a picture of it, where I'm taking the cylinder and I'm squishing it so it's a squarish cylinder. And then that'll give me 4 panels that I can individually decorate. For this marble, I'm going to just decorate 2. One in the color of enamel, and the other in aventurine frit, which will be sparkly copper dust. Alright, so I've pressed that cylinder into a square. And there you can see down through the core of the marble, all the way to my handle that I'm holding on. That's the clear light blue glass. But on the side, it's enamel powder, white background. I'll get it back in the flame. I don't want it to get too cold because then it can crack. Glass is sensitive and emotional. It has to be kept the way it likes it or it goes crazy. It just cracks. Alright, so now I've evened the heat back up. I'm going to heat one surface or one panel, and then I'm going to go to a tin and pick up some different color enamel powder that I have. And I'm going to get a couple layers just right away. I tapped it on there like 4 times, and so that's 4 layers of yellow enamel on that one panel, that flat spot. I'm going to melt that in and even the heat of the whole core up again. Then on the opposing side of that yellow panel, so on that side, I'm going to put the copper aventurine frit, which is very sparkly copper dust encased in clear glass. It won't look like much when I pick it up and melt it in, but when the marble's finished, it will look nice because you'll have that clear casement layer that's going to bring it out like a lens. I'm going to tap that into the frit twice. You can see there's a bunch of it on that flat panel that I've created. It's flopping a little bit because I got it pretty hot when I went in there because I really wanted it to pick up as much of that as I could. But I do want the background to show through a little bit. If I wanted it to be completely covered, I could heat that up and go in again. Oh, look, see, it's falling. So the glass is moving. It's very hot. But with that first pickup, let me get it straight. You can see the background through the frit that I just picked up. And that's what I want. So now, increase the heat on this enough so that I can change the shape of the cylinder. And what I need to do is, it's getting a little bit long, so I'm going to shorten it, and I'm going to roll it so it's cylindrical again. Then I'm going to take all those little pieces of clear glass and the green and blue transparent glass and arrange them all the way around this cylinder. So let's shorten this and get it a little more cylindrical. It's probably going to take me a couple taps. I push the corners down and I shortened it. I'm going to shorten it and round it the rest of the way back into a cylinder this time. A lot of times when you're doing glass, if you haven't watched me before, a lot of it's like 30 seconds of reheating and you get to poke it for like 3 seconds, maybe a little longer. So here I've been redoing heat, re-evening the heat for like a half a minute. Now I can go and get that cylinder formed a little more nicely. And then I'm done manipulating it for now. Now you can see that it's cylindrical. You got yellow on the back half. The venturine melted into the surface on that half. It's not quite cylindrical, but I think that's going to be okay. The next step for this kind of marble, this is sort of a lampworker's version of taking this and dipping it into a glass blowing furnace full of clear. I don't have a glass blowing furnace full of clear right now because I just have my torch. My furnace is over there. I should have showed you. It's I'm getting it ready, doing some repair on it to plug it in and run it for a week or two before it gets too terribly hot for the summer. I hope to run it twice in June, and then July and August, maybe not, and then in September again. It's really, you plan and you hope it would work out, but really, you get involved in things and you say, well, I want to make some glass now. I'm inspired now. Let's do it now. And then part of your brain is going, but it's hot out. I'm like, well, glass is hot. Let's do it. We'll sweat. It'll be fun. All right, so there's the first piece of clear on the edge of the yellow panel. I'm going to put a few more on. And I'll probably go back and forth on either side of that one that I just put on there. And I want one of the green transparent pieces that I'm going to put on like this to be in the middle of one of those clear panels, and the blue one on the other side. And I'll put these two on, and then I'll show you what we have going on. So I have these two rod pieces going around. What I'm doing here is I'm heating the end of these little pieces, and I'm flashing it. I'm getting it up to temperature a little bit more slowly, sort of gently introducing the glass. If I just stuck it right in there, it would pop and explode. All right, I'm going to get one more on the yellow side, and then I'm like right in the middle of where I want to put that blue piece on this side, right in that little crevice between that venturine and that clear rod. I want to put this cobalt transparent rod. Then I'll keep working the clear pieces in until it's time to put in the green one. And it's the place I want it to go. So I heat one corner pretty hot of this rod, and I attach it to the end of the cylinder there, and then I fold it down into place while that little corner of the rod is very hot and bendy. I'll get one more in there. Oops. It's popping and exploding on me. One or two more in there and I'll show you again. So, heat, attach, bend into place. And there we go. We're like more than halfway around. And you can kind of see on the opposite side is where I'm going to put that green one. So I got a few more clear ones to put on. Then I'll start melting it all together. Let's put on two more and see where we're at. And it might even be a little bit short on the clear. Let's see. No, I just about right. Alright. I'm going to put the green one on. Right opposite of the blue one. So right on the bottom there. And it looks like I have space for two more clear rod sections, and then we'll be all the way around. So the whole curved face of that cylinder will be covered in this clear and transparent color rod sections. Once that's done, the free end, the unattached end, I'll start melting those ends and pushing them down towards the end. So I'm going to melt around here and push that down towards the end. When that's done, I'm going to take a new metal rod and attach to there and then do the same to this end. So I'm going to jump up a gear on my heat here. Because my marble is bigger, it needs more heat to keep the heat even within the hole of the marble. So you see when I put this in, that yellow, that's called a sodium flare, and that's what these glasses I'm wearing eliminate. So I'm not seeing that through the glasses. I have a lens cover for some of my smaller webcams that I'm going to try next week. And so we can get a camera going right down in here, which would be cool and very fun to see. Because sometimes there's a lot of really cool stuff going on. Like I'm poking those little ends, and when I'm getting it hot, with the tweezer, I'm poking each end and pulling it towards the center. As it's turning, I'm just looking for my point where I'm going to do the most good, and I pull that little piece of rod in towards the center. And so there's probably, I don't know, 100 manipulations in there to get that all down to a point. I've done like 12 more. You can see it's a little bit more towards the end. And this glass on the end is getting quite hot. And these tweezers get quite hot. So you'll see me putting them in and there's a noise. Tss, it's water in a little jar that I use to keep my tools from getting too hot. Because when they get too hot, they stick to the glass. I'm going to even up the heat on the whole thing for a second here. Back in and clean up those little bits. Now I'm going to bring the heat from the tip where it's very hot and bring it back a little bit and make sure all these ends are melted down to the core. You can see there's one that's like swinging out. I want to make sure that's attached. There's some more swinging out. Let's get them all firmly attached, and then we'll switch to the other handle side, and then we'll pull those points. I can actually use my tweezers and get a head start and get in there right now And let me see if I can get one. Get it hot, get over to the magnifying glass. Get right in there and get those hobos down. I can't see it and do it all at the same time. You can see I'm trying to pull all those rods down to the point. So if I had my crucible furnace running and I was going to do an enamel marble like this, I would have made the core the same way, but instead of gathering it with rods, I would have just dipped it in, gotten the gather, rolled it through the enamel powder, picked up, made my panels, picked those up, put on whatever, like that transparent blue and that transparent green, just swiped that on, and then re-dipped the whole thing, and then cleaned up the ends and gone on from the marble from there. When you go into a crucible furnace, you often will get a lot of extra glass on the end. You have to resist the urge to want to try to retain that, because you can't keep everything and maintain your design. If you have a design that you want to start at one end and go to the other end and be uninterrupted and even, a lot of times there's sacrifices that have to be made in the volume of the glass. So bigger is not better. Adding more is not the answer. A lot of times taking away the parts that don't fit is the way you find the way your design is going to look the best. So I've attached the metal handle to the other free side. Now I'm going to detach this side. See how I got it pretty hot, so it's wiggling around. So a little hotter and it'll pull out. And there's glass and junk on the end of it. You can actually see how it's eroded from constantly being heated up and quenched in the water. Let's do it again. Alright, now I'm going to get back in here on that end and pull it down over the edge of where that enamel is in there. The enamel, if it pokes through this clear outer layer, will get fuzzy looking. So the glass on the outside won't be smooth and won't look nice. Now, as I was talking, I wasn't paying as close attention as I normally would, and some of the outside clear glass around the center got a little bit oxidized. I had the propane up too high, or I was too close to the face of the torch, and the glass is a little bit burned. Always trying to get as much heat into the glass as you can without burning it or vaporizing it. This torch working is different in the fact that you're not dealing with glass that's already hot in a pot and picking it up and making differences in it as it cools down. Here you're taking cold stuff, you're getting it up to temperature and doing all your manipulation. And it's very easy to, along the way, go too fast and burn the crap out of everything. Alright, so now I'm going to melt all the middle part of this marble, and I'm going to squish it flat, working my way from one end to the other. So if there's any air trapped in between all those little rod sections that I put on there in a concentric outer circle, I'm going to push that air out if I can. I normally would go, if I did end up trapping some air, I would go in there with a dental pick, reheat the area where there was a bubble, and dig it out. Big ones. Little ones are okay. And sometimes a bubble gives you the idea that this is not a perfect thing. Not squirted out of the machine. Something that someone made and did one at a time, like we're doing here today. This is not a giant cane that I'm plopping a million marbles off of. It's not glass coming out of a tank getting squirted onto some rollers to make millions and millions of glass balls. This is a one-of-a-kind thing that will never happen again. Alright, so I got it hot. I'm going to work it from my handle end to my unattached end and give it some squeezes. And I trapped all kinds of air in there, which I didn't want to do. But that's alright. This is a demonstration marble, so that's fine. I can see there's stripes of air in between two of the rods that I trapped and pushed them in. So as the glass melts all together, those will contract into little bubbles. Right now it looks like a little fluorescent light bulb tube. I can see it glowing in there. I don't think you might be able to see it. I think that's it facing you now. And there is just the dense and enamel background. And let's find that bubble again. So that, I think those are the lines of bubbles. Anyway, he'll be alright. Let's twist it. Actually, I would like to even this up a little bit. Press it one more time. If you're trying to make a really nice marble, this is where you can take time and get things right and go back and forth. And you can always slow down and back off the heat a little bit if you want. A lot of times if you back off the heat a little bit, you're going to slow way down. So the idea is to get up to that point where you're working quickly, and if you're going to go back in and fix something, you're not letting the heat go down too much, just enough to get in there, make your correction, and get the heat back up so you can do your next manipulation or your next series of moving it towards the finish line of the marble. So right now it's fixing time, but what I'm working towards is getting two handles on this so I can spin it. That's my next goal. And so to get to that goal, you want the cylinder to be relatively even and balanced. You want it to be round. You want there to not be too many bubbles. You want the ends to not look too different from each other because you want the heat to be even. So when you start twisting it, the twist, the rotation on this part of the marble is going to be the same as in the middle of the marble, and the same as the end of the marble. Ideally, you want a little bit more in the center because then when you take the ends and finish them, you'll add the last amount of twist that you want to end to bring it up to the rest of the twist of the design. You can't untwist a marble. So you start with less and work towards more. Let's start. This end is cold. So hit that for a few seconds. The free end is cold. Now, I've got that free end where it was cold. I heated it more than the rest of the marble, and now the marble is, the heat is equalizing it, and I'm helping it by moving the whole marble through the flame. So now you can see it's all kind of the same color, and it's pretty hot. It's flopping down if I stop twisting it. Now I'm going to get my other metal handle on there. I need to make sure that the heat is high enough in the metal so it's just going past orange. The glass where I'm going to attach is a little bit hotter than the rest of the marble, and I can just get right in there. That sort of bores in. And you can see that aventurine, the blue stripe, the yellow enamel there, and the green transparent stripe. Alright, now that's the last time this marble will be looking at you straight. We're going to twist it up. So, I want the heat to be even throughout the marble before I start twisting it. And what's going to happen is I'm always rotating this glass. That's like a good habit for anyone working in glass. You're always spinning. What's going to happen here, though, is that depending on the way the gather that I'm working on is looking, I'm going to be spinning it, but I'll be catching a little bit with my right hand, catching a little bit with my left hand, while the other one is still spinning. So it's not always a conscious decision which one is catching and which one is continuing to spin. I think some people probably have like a dominant catch hand and a dominant spin hand, so like they're always spinning with their left and always catching with the right. But I think like doing pottery or doing anything else where you have something that's spinning that you're manipulating, you really want to have a degree of control on both sides. So I can see that I've added some spin to this now, and like on the end towards the flame needs a little more spin than the other side. So I'm going to make some mental adjustments to that and increase the heat on that side and be catching a little bit more with this hand to try to even that side of the twist. That might work, it might not, I don't know. Let's pretend it's working perfectly. I feel better already. I think that's enough spin for this marble. So the middle has a little bit more spin than the ends. The ends, I'm actually going to come in with a pair of scissors, which is my equivalent of glassworking tongs or jacks for the scale that I'm working on here, mini glass blowing style. So I'm going to heat this end and get that handle off. And I'm trying to pull some glass with me that time. Pretty hot. Anyway, I don't want to leave any debris in there, just a nice habit. It doesn't really matter at this point because I'm going to get in and I'm going to take off that last little bit of marble. As I pinch it, I'm going to make a rut. And as I spin this, I'm going to catch with this. As it spins, I'm going to pinch that down a little bit further each one, and I'm going to add a little bit of spin to that end. And see, it's a little bit loose compared to the spin further back in the marble. Let's see how that works. I haven't done one of these in a while, so this is pretty fun. But that also means it probably won't look very good. Alright, so I've spun it, and I've caught it, I've increased the twist. Oh, there we go. And now that little part that's holding it, I should be able to tap off. That's the end. You can see there's aventurine, there's the colors and the enamel all coming to a point at the end. And you can see right there at 6 o'clock where the enamel has rarefied, so you can see into the core of the marble. So let's heat the whole thing up, just because that's what you need to do to marbles, so that they don't crack. And you want to make sure that this junction point here, where the steel is meeting the glass, is hot enough so that it does not crack off. So I've reheated the whole marble. I'm going to reheat that end, because I think I can do a little bit neater job on that end. So let's heat that up. And I'm going to do the same thing I just did, where I spin it and take off a little piece, to try to improve that end, which I always think of as the pole of the marble. Like North Pole, South Pole. And then so for marbles, no matter how good you do, there's always a nice pole and an uglier pole. And the uglier pole is where your signature goes. Alright, so I've got that heated up, and I'm going to get my scissors in there. I'm not just like 3 millimeters off the end. And then I'm going to pinch and turn. You can't do it at that angle and do it correctly. I'm already up. My angle is off. You can see I kind of get my angle off a little bit. I want it to come off cleanly. I want to pinch it to a point so that all those colors come to a point, and the core is not showing through that thin layer of enamel. So let's try it again. I'm straighter this time because I'm at the angle I'm used to working at. Ooh, and I've squeezed it right off. So there's the little nub that came off. Very hot. And the end looks better. Right to a point. Alright. Now I'm going to collapse the cylinder a little bit on this side. Make it a little more hemispherical, closer to the shape of the marble that it will ultimately become. The cylinder shape was conducive to making our design the way we wanted it. But now we don't really need it to be a cylinder on this side anymore. It can be a sphere. Or rather a hemisphere. So I'm going to use a little bit of pressure and some spinning in a graphite mold. I'm going into one of these hemispheres that's bigger than the marble that I'm working on. Graphite tends to pull heat out of the glass pretty fast. So I'm not spending a lot of time in this graphite mold. So I've made that end a little more hemispherical. The cylinder is collapsed a bit. You can see that end is looking marbly. So I'm going to get I want a steel puntee on there that's a good connection point. I don't want to mess up my end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some junk glass and get a little tiny gather. I'm going to cover my nice end and leave a blob down there. Now, I'm going to heat up my puntee rod. Puntee is the fancy word for handle. And then I'm going to detach the puntee right on that little blob I put in place. Now for this demonstration, that's not really going to improve things for me. But working on your own and trying to get things perfect, that's just one of those little measures that you take to get things, to improve things. You're always trying to improve your work. Every time you're going for a little bit better, a little bit closer to your ideal. Well, you'd hope anyway. Even if you're working fast and doing production, it's like, how can I do that with less motions? How can I do that so it comes out better, but I'm not spending as much fuel to keep it hot? How can I do this? How can I do that? Trying new things often will lead you to different ideas about different places in the design that you weren't even thinking of to begin with. Oh, I made a really good idea for finishing the end of this marble. I wonder what would happen if I made some improvements earlier so that I could get to that end point and have that end point work out even slicker. Or maybe not, I don't know. You don't like to do it that way. I like to do it that way. Alright, so I've heated up the end of the marble like I did before, and I've been spinning it the same way, and I'm pinching it with the scissors, but I'm catching it each time I pinch it, adding a little bit more spin And now that little attachment point is pretty cool, so I should be able to tap it off. And let's see what that end looks like. Pretty nice, coming to a point. Alright, now let's heat it up and get this end a little more spherical. And this thing, the design is done. Now we're just going to make it look like a marble. Some would say that is the hardest part about making a marble, getting it spherical. It's a lot of interesting theories about how you might want to start, continue, and finish making a marble spherical. And my suggestion is this. You start, continue, and finish to make it spherical. Bam. Nailed it. So, on my first pass, I've just shortened it a little bit. I went into a hemisphere that was bigger than the marble I was working on. As I was spinning, I pushed a little bit. I used the sides of the marble to make sure I wasn't flattening it too fast. And I'm going to do that again. My ultimate goal is to make this kind of a football shape. And that is continuing to make it spherical. So I started making it spherical. I'm continuing to make it spherical. It's not spherical. I wasn't trying to make it spherical here, but I was continuing it on its ultimate voyage. And you see, it's a little bit football shaped. But it's no longer cylindrical in the middle and round on the ends, or round on one end and kind of a cylinder with a rounded end. But it's now really, the design is even, and there's really just taper on the ends. That's like your best, I think, middle portion of making something marble shaped. So, oops, piece of glass on me. Just imagine. I mean a piece of sharp hot glass. Alright, so now that I've got this a little bit football shaped, I'm going to start at the pulling back towards me as I'm rotating. And then I'm spiraling the rotation rather than pulling back to pushing forward at the end. So I'm sort of working through the whole curvature of that sphere. I'm pulling and then pushing, pulling and pushing. So I guess that might make sense for people who've like done pottery wheel stuff, I'm told. Or if you see people doing glass where they're rolling it on a bench, they're like pushing out and pulling back, pushing out and pulling back. It's kind of a way of putting force on something while it's spinning in a gentle way, but you're still in control. You're not like throwing it away. You're just pushing out and away from you and a little bit out, and then pulling towards you and a little bit back. Alright, so I'm going to do what I said before to finish making it spherical. It's pulling and pushing. The problem was is that while I was talking, I wasn't doing it right. So I didn't talk as much, I didn't try to show you as much, but I did it right. And now it's spherical. So now I've used the graphite mold to make it as spherical as possible. Now there's ripples in the surface from heat being drawn out by the graphite mold. So this time I'm going to try to do it again, but only very quickly. I don't want to take a lot of heat out of the marble, but I want to perfect its spherical nature on this side as much as I can. So quick pass through a bigger marble mold, and then going to one that's smaller, where I'm just using the rim of that mold. I'm spinning it, but I'm changing the axis of rotation. So I'm taking this whole unattached 2/3 of the marble and making it very spherical. Now I want to polish that surface and get it ready to detach this metal handle and put on my final attachment, which is going to be just a tiny attachment with a glass rod. When it comes to putting the final finish on the marble, I like to move to cherry wood molds, and that's cherry as in cherry trees. Any fruit wood is good. The even grain and the easily carboned but tough burned carbon residue that remains on those makes for great glass blowing molds. So what's happening is I've fire polished it, and I'm letting the temperature drop enough so that when I can get, here's one of my cherry wood molds, essentially holes drilled in a paddle. When I touch the cherry wood, it's not going to grab. And I'm just spinning it. I'm changing the axis of rotation. I'm changing to different holes. And you can see how when I spin it and I let it go, it keeps spinning. That means that I've got a really good sphericalness going on this marble. Excuse me, I'm sweating. So that is smooth. You can see the reflection of the lights above us, and they're not jumping very much. So that is a spherical and smooth end of the marble. It's got a nice pull. So now I want to make my final attachment point. I take a glass rod, get it hot, roll it into a pencil point like that. Now I'm going to heat just that point, touch it right to the center. That's my last attachment point. Now I can detach the steel handle. And remember that little blob of glass that I put on there to protect my pull? Now I can pull that off. So I'm going to heat it up. In there with my tweezers. And as I pull it off, I'm going to pull it away and twist the marble. And the idea here is to do a good job. So let's do that. If I don't do a good job, I'll do better next time. So I'm looking at the end. Looks like I maintained it. I've got a little nub sticking up. There it is. And out of that nub is all the color rarefied down to a little point. And some of that enamel powder. I don't want it to come through and start oxidizing, so I'm going to heat that area up and then just tap it in. Rotating. Now I'm going to heat the area around that, and it's going to come up and merge with that cooler area that I've just made. And I'm going to make it spherical. So pretty close. Make it more spherical by just touching it into a graphite mold. And I think I fixed that one. Let's have a look. So that nub is gone. Made the pull. Pretty good. You can see some ripples. Surface is not even. So let's get in there. Let the flames do the work. We're going to keep it spinning. We're going to get the surface hotter than the inside a little bit, and surface tension of glass as a liquid. I'm just going to pull this into a very nice surface, and my spinning of it is going to keep it from retreating from the shape of a perfect sphere. Gravity wants to make it a blob. And it's not a perfect sphere. It's darn close. It's going to get really nice when I run it through the cherry wood molds. I'm going to heat it one more time. Then I'm going to let it cool down so it's not going to grab that cherry wood mold. And I'll spin it in there, just using the rim of the cherry wood mold. I'll go from one hole to the next because I don't want to spend more than 3 seconds in on any of those rims to burn the wood more than I need to. So here's the cherry wood mold again. I'm going to touch that in, spin it, change the axis as I'm spinning just for a second or two, move to the next hole. I'll hit usually 3. Now let's have a look at how smooth we got it. Hopefully our final tooling of the glass with the cherry wood. So heating it up just to have a look at my surface, and the surface looks really good. And the spin is pretty even. The twist from end to end. The poles look nice. So now, my last attachment point is just that little pencil point of clear glass. I'm going to chill that with my little mini Jack's scissors while I'm holding it over a fiber board. And then once I've tapped it off, I'm going to pick up this torch, polish off that last bit, and I'm going to pick it up with some preheated pliers. Let's do that. So I'm in the fire plate. I just touched the scissors to it and it came right off. Picking up the torch, polishing that nub. Generally, when you're doing this, I turn down the propane a little bit. Sometimes to get particles off the torch, because I'm picking it up and disrupting it, I'll tap it a few times if it gets any loose carbon off first. Then I'll polish it usually in 3 passes, getting that nub attachment point hot enough so I can see any irregularities. Let it cool, heat it back up, let it cool, heat it back up. And by that point, it's fallen into a perfect surface. Now I'm going to heat up these little tongs. I heat them up till they're orange. Then I let them cool down. It's like a lot of glass working. You sort of shoot above the temperature, and then as it's coming down, bam, that's the right temperature. I can go pick up my marble. I'm going to put it in the annealing oven. So after messing around with this glass has a tetragonal silicone matrix. And so the bond angles where the glass, they get bent. And then there's impurities in there, so they're stretched around the impurities in that molecular matrix. And within those bond angles, there's stress and energy. So the annealing oven lets the glass sit just at the point between where it's liquid and solid, and those bond angles can get to the place where there's less energy waiting to be immediately released in them. And that's annealing. And so you need to make sure that what you're working on is annealing for 1 hour for every 1/4 inch of thickness. I usually go for a 1-inch marble, 2 hours. And then I bring it down through its strain points gradually. That's not, you can program your kiln to do that for you. I usually just go by feel because I'm doing a few marbles at a time in my small demonstration kiln. When I'm doing a big run in one of my larger annealing ovens, then I have a schedule that I keep where it gets turned down a certain amount each time, and I'm checking the temperatures with a digital and an analog pyrometer to check against them. And I also have, over the last 30 years, I've developed a pretty good feel of what temperature looks like as far as, the orange that comes up as you're looking into the kiln, like looking into a hot oven. And also feeling it at different distances. So that's it for today. Feel free to, and semi-obligated, to go shopping at Pavliscak Studios. And I will see you next week. Thanks for dropping by and watching the glass demonstration. I appreciate it. All right, have a good night.